Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, the House passing a $900 billion annual defense bill, from blocking U.S. investments that benefit China's military to cutting the Pentagon's supply chain ties. We unpack how the bill counters Beijing. The U.S. joining Japan in a show of force against China. Nuclear-capable American bombers flying alongside Japanese fighter jets just one day after facing aggression from China and Russia. China Human Rights Fair on Capitol Hill. Several organizations are showcasing the atrocities of the Chinese Communist Party.
If that's the type of business partner you're dealing with, if that's the type of military competitor you're dealing with, how can you trust them?
Before we dive into the news, here's a message from today's sponsor. As we report every day, global markets are becoming more uncertain. China's growing economy and growing tensions with the U.S. are reshaping the financial landscape, and China is buying gold at record rates to diversify its foreign reserves and decrease its reliance on the U.S. dollar. It isn't just countries that can use gold to protect their wealth, it's individuals as well. That's why we believe in protecting what's real. Physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold offers stability when markets turn unpredictable. Unlike paper assets, these are tangible stores of value that have weathered economic turmoil, political instability, and inflation for centuries. American Hartford Gold holds an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of 5-star reviews from satisfied customers. You can have gold and silver delivered right to your home or stored safely in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And right now, when you call and mention China in Focus, you could get up to $15,000 in free silver with your first purchase. Call 855-403-1118 or text China to 65532. That's China to 65532, or call 855-403-1118. You can also click the link in the description down below. Protect what you've earned, because in uncertain times, truth and value still matter. The U.S. House has passed a massive defense policy bill on Wednesday, authorizing a record $901 billion in annual military spending. The 3,000-page bill includes a provision to review U.S. investments in China that could help develop its military power. Here are the details.
On this vote, the yeas are 312, the nays are 112. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House passed a massive $901 billion defense spending bill on Wednesday. The tally was 312-112 and is $8 billion more than what President Donald Trump asked for. The 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, is used by Congress to advance priorities from troop pay raises to major weapons programs, making it closely watched by defense contractors. The bill provides $800 million in military assistance to Ukraine in the next 2 years and includes other measures reinforcing the U.S. commitment to Europe's defense. The bill also provides extensive support for Israel and mandates reviews of arms embargoes against the country and U.S. options to meet Israel's defense needs. This year's bill also focuses on cutting programs for VAD, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Trump has said he will sign the NDAA into law once it reaches the White House.
Restricting capital flow, targeting top communist leadership's wealth, and kicking China out of the Pentagon supply chain. The annual defense bill is taking a hard line against China. A big part of it aims to restrict U.S. investments into sectors that could bolster China's military power. It requires American companies and investors to notify the Treasury Department when they plan to invest in sensitive technologies in China. The bill also gives the Treasury Department authority to block deals. And in a blow to the Chinese Communist Party's top leadership, the bill requires the U.S. intelligence chief to publish a report on the wealth of senior CCP officials within a year. Among those in the report, Chinese leader Xi Jinping will also be recorded. A China expert told NTD that he thinks the move is a form of psychological warfare by the U.S.
The U.S. aims to expose corruption within the Chinese Communist Party by publicizing the wealth of its top leaders. Washington hopes this will create divisions within the party and show the Chinese public just how much wealth the top leadership have.
Publicizing the top communist leadership's wealth could deal a huge blow to the Chinese regime. Such information is not available within China and could increase public dissent. Turning back to the defense bill, it also blocks the Pentagon from contracting with Chinese biotech firms tied to the Chinese military. The bill doubles down on removing China from the War Department's supply chains. That's by restricting the DoD from buying a range of items from China, such as critical minerals and advanced batteries. Diplomatically, the defense bill calls for more regional China officers to monitor Beijing's commercial and military activities worldwide. They would also track China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's the country's multi-trillion-dollar effort to build ports and highways in developing countries and extend the communist regime's influence. The Pentagon was also directed to strengthen U.S. presence in the Indo-Pacific by partnering more closely with Taiwan and the Philippines. And with regards to Taiwan, the defense bill earmarks $1 billion for a program that helps the island defend itself. It also directs the Pentagon to team up with Taiwan to develop and produce drones. U.S. Coast Guards would be sent to train their Taiwanese counterparts to increase the island's deterrence capability. Another provision supports Taiwan's bid to join the International Monetary Fund. It would provide the island with financial protection from China. The U.S. flexing its muscle to stand with Japan amid escalating Chinese aggression. The U.S. military flew nuclear-capable bombers alongside Japanese fighter jets on Wednesday over the Sea of Japan. This comes just one day after nuclear-capable Russian bombers and Chinese aircraft flew near Japan's southern island. Japan's defense ministry said Tokyo and Washington reaffirmed their strong resolve to prevent any attempt to change the existing order by force. It added that both countries' forces are ready to respond to a threat at any moment. Japan was put on high alert after a Chinese fighter locked its radar on Japanese jets over the weekend. It's a provocative move since it can be a step taken just before launching weapons. In response, Tokyo scrambled jets to monitor the situation. Here's what Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, had to say about China's military harassment.
This is a highly inappropriate act. We firmly opposes unilateral actions that use violence or coercion to change regional peace and stability. Peace must be achieved by all parties, and China has the same responsibility.
Beijing has been ramping up aggression following the Japanese Prime Minister's comment over Taiwan last month. The Prime Minister said Japan could get involved militarily if China invaded the island. On Capitol Hill, several organizations participated in the China Human Rights Fair on Wednesday, showcasing the atrocities of the Chinese regime. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
In China, we have people whose rights are being violated.
The Chinese Communist Party's human rights abuses on full display here at the China Fair on Capitol Hill. Now, many people sharing their personal experiences about what it's like to suffer the atrocities under the Chinese Communist Party. Let's take a look.
My parents, both of them, has been arrested and detained to the sentenced to many times to the jail.
Lydia Wang is a practitioner of Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It was introduced to the public in 1992, but in 1999, the CCP launched a brutal persecution against the practice due to its popularity and moral teachings. Wang's parents were immediately targeted. Her father was arrested and subjected to forced labor and tortured to permanent disability, later dying of his injuries.
My father came out from the jail and her health condition is very bad. And soon after, my father passed away.
Her mother was arrested for the 11th time in 2022, all because she was passing out information flyers about Falun Dafa. She's currently serving a 4-year prison sentence.
Falun Gong practitioners who I have known for a very long time simply for exercising their religious freedom. Chinese government are afraid of them because there is very significant number, and so we just need to keep up with our pressure.
And perhaps the most horrific is the CCP's use of forced organ harvesting.
Forced organ harvesting is something very unique to China. The Chinese regime is the only regime in the world that's harvesting organs from its own citizens.
It's primarily targeting Falun Dafa practitioners, but also Muslim Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Christians are subjected to the practice, killing them on demand in the process.
The Chinese government illegally imprisons these prisoners of conscience, and they have a data bank where they match the organs, they test their blood. These often go to high-ranking Chinese communist officials. but really to anybody in the world who's willing to pay.
Some people say, that sounds so terrible, why isn't it a headline every day? Against the backdrop of Chinese government propaganda, quite literally billions of dollars spent putting out news in every language as well.
One of the many bills to address this is the Falun Gong Protection Act. It passed the House earlier this year and is awaiting a vote in the Senate.
To discuss the human rights situation in China, NTD Steve Lance was joined by Cynthia Sun. She's a senior researcher at the Falun Dafa Information Center, which co-hosted the China Human Rights Fair on Capitol Hill. Watch.
Cynthia, great to have you in studio with us. Quite an event that you put on there. More than 10 different organizations representing a wide range of groups, religious and ethnic groups that are being persecuted inside of China, Uyghurs, Tibetan Buddhists, Falun Gong, Christians. Talk to us about what your main goal, what you were trying to achieve with this event, bringing everybody together on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I know it's a rare occurrence because now that we're going into the holidays, a lot of people don't really want to think about human rights abuses. But I think for Congress to reprioritize human rights following the shutdown and before the holiday break, I think it's a really important and critical time period, because if you talk about human rights, civil rights, just civility of the average citizen in China and how they treat even American citizens, the Chinese Communist Party has no respect for human life and for human liberty. And so if that's the type of business partner you're dealing with, if that's the type of military competitor you're dealing with, how can you trust them?
And sometimes, Cynthia, when we hear this in the discourse, it's often referred to as ethnic minorities. Mm-hmm. And people think that might be just a small group of people. But we're talking about millions of Uyghurs, nearly 100 million Falun Gong practitioners, underground church Christians, millions of Tibetan Buddhists. How would you describe the true state of religious persecution in China today?
Yeah, and to be honest, those numbers that you mentioned just now, they could be much, much higher. We could be seeing a majority of religious believers in China, but China doesn't allow independent investors to go in and check. The UN special rapporteurs have tried, so has the US government, but those are just the baseline conservative numbers that we know. And so in terms of religious persecution, I think right now what we are looking at is a really dark cave. What we're doing today with the fair is trying to illuminate that cave, but the Chinese Communist Party, through propaganda, through misinformation, is just trying to dig it deeper and deeper so that we're unable to reach the reality of the situation. And I think it's really grave on the ground for people who just want to clarify that they believe in God and that there's nothing wrong with that. And the Chinese Communist Party doesn't allow that even.
We are hearing a lot of stories and reports about Chinese dissidents being harassed, as well as even American citizens threatened on U.S. soil by Chinese special agents. How real is this transnational repression right here in the U.S., and who is really being targeted?
It's so real that it's actually scary, because recently we did a survey of over 1,000 Americans who practice Falun Gong, and we're trying to make that into a report publishing early next year. Through those interviews, we found that, you know, people of all ethnicities, all across 48, 49 states in America are being targeted not only by the consulate, but also by other actors that are either in their workplace who are pressuring them or on social media.
I think it really speaks, Cynthia, to how emboldened the CCP is, and a lot of people might not have heard, perhaps they have, that they're even operating Chinese police stations, or were, on American soil up until about a year ago in New York City. That's one place. There were others. What do you think is missing from the discourse in terms of the American public's understanding of the CCP's human rights abuses?
Well, I think the one point that you mentioned about the police stations on our soil is extremely important, because I don't think people understand how far that goes. From the documents that I read, the consulates surveil 3 generations down for the diaspora. So even my children and my children's children will be under surveillance. At least that's the end goal. And, you know, we have so many millions, tens of millions of Chinese Americans here who are just going about their daily lives. But for them to feel fear, in LA, for example, I had a friend of mine tell me, he's in the FBI, that he saw a Chinese police car on the streets of LA driving down as if it was a real police car. So I think these things are something that we have to stop immediately, because China is acting like America is just free land.
It's not just America, it's other American allies like South Korea and other places, Taiwan, even the slow creep of communism, Israel, and the CCP. Cynthia Sun, really greatly appreciate you joining us in studio.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.
Coming up, how widespread is the Chinese regime's spy tactics around the world? Paul John Stone says for every 10 in the West, China has 1,000. What are the main tactics China employs, and what's the full scale?
And I'm certain that there's a large number of politicians out there in most Western countries who have been into China who have been compromised.
Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. What's the scale of China's espionage across the globe? Beijing is known for using honey traps to build influence in the West and gather intelligence. But just how widespread is it? Joining us with a unique perspective on all of this is Paul John Stone. He's a former federal agent with the Australian Federal Police and a regional security advisor at Defensive Measures International. Paul John Stone, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. An area often not looked at here is Chinese influence operations or even espionage. Yes. And I know you've covered this for years, so talk to us about the scale of this. Do we even know the scale of this?
Look, I don't believe anybody knows the full scale because, you know, I've said this before, for every 10 intelligence operatives that the West might have, the Chinese have got 1,000. You know, who knows what the number really is, but, you know, I predict that they have more intelligence agents in China or spread throughout the world than what we probably have in our military here in Australia because they've got the population. And so they've spread all around the world. They have, you know, obviously they've got declared agents at the embassies, but they've also got a lot of agents out there that are undeclared, that are sleeper cells. They've got people out there who've probably been assimilated into our societies for a long time. And that's not to say that we should be thinking that every Chinese person in the West is, you know, potentially a spy, but we have to ask the question, you know, who are they? Are they being influenced? Because a lot of these people unwillingly are being threatened by the CCP because they may have family back in the mainland. So, you know, when it comes to the intelligence gathering, it doesn't necessarily need to be a trained intelligence operative. They can, with the way that the CCP works, they can influence students at any university anywhere in the world by simply saying to them that if you don't get this information, if you don't try to obtain this information, you know, it could have grave consequences on your family back in the mainland. So that's just at the basic level. I always say to people, I say to my clients, whenever there's a delegation, you can always assume that, say there's a dozen people that are coming to have a meeting or delegation, you can always assume at least 3 or 4 of those are what I call vacuum cleaners, and they're sucking up the information. They're either, you know, serving intelligence agents or they're working in that capacity, and their job is really to take as much information, and that can be any type of IP. It can be military secrets, it can be, you know, agricultural secrets, it can be anything at all that they can take which is going to benefit the Chinese Communist Party and, you know, reverse engineer any technology or steal any IP. So I always talk to people and say that, you know, these delegations, when they come, they put on the smiles, they put on all the nice, they exchange pleasantries and gifts and that. That's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. I've noticed that when I've travelled and taught throughout China at conferences, you'll have these young PhD students that want to come and talk to you. And I know too well that they're not PhD students. And because of the questions they ask, the way they ask these questions, it's almost taken from a script. So, you know, the espionage side of things with the Chinese, it is much, much bigger and much more powerful than what I think anybody really knows. And I think that the Chinese Communist Party and their agents will continue to take as much information as they can in any aspect, because what they want is domination, global domination. And to have that, they've got to have the military, they've got to have the technology, they've got to have the economic side of it, they've got to have all this. And the only way they can do it, if they can't do it themselves, is steal and reverse engineer it all. And as I said before to me, you know, in 1999, when a general from the PLA showed me the blueprints of a combat boot that they had actually stolen, and this is in 1999, and to be told then that they can take anything from any country and reproduce it within 24 hours. So I think also one of the biggest problems that we face is the use of honey traps. When it comes to the espionage world, their ability to be able to trap politicians, business executives, just any person, and then they can use that person for their own influence. And it may be just, they may target that person and keep them in place for many, many years until they're in a position of authority, and then they can actually use that, and they'll ring them up and say, hello, remember us. Now it's time to work for us. Because it could be because they've been compromised, they've been blackmailed. I tell a lot of my clients all the time, again, when you travel to China, you must expect that every hotel room you walk into, no matter what rating it is, you're being watched, you're being monitored, you're being surveyed. And people are quite surprised when I tell them this, and I say to them all the time, because people say, what can they get from me? What would they want to be interested in me? Whatever's on your phone, whatever's on your laptop, even if you're nobody, and they can take something from your phone or your laptop, it might be of benefit to them. So, but the use of honey traps in particular, they are very, very good at that. And I warn people all the time, do not succumb to these honey traps, because they are very, very good. And they'll use it on LinkedIn, they'll use it on dating sites. And just recently I did an exercise, went on to an Asian dating site, and the number of women from China and Hong Kong in particular that were targeting, and they were very interested if you had a government background, a police background, military background, business or academia. It seemed to be that if you put in that you were, no disrespect to plumbers, but if you put in that you're a plumber, they didn't want to talk to you. And it was very, very clear that when you put in, I'm a retired government person, straight away, they want to know more about you. So they use these means because it's easy for them to do this, and they can get a lot of information, because two things that in human nature, greed and love. Everybody wants to make money and have money, and everybody wants to love and be loved. So they capitalize on this. They target people in different positions, and they use it effectively. And I've seen a lot of people fall into the trap of a honey trap and get compromised. And I'm certain that there's a large number of politicians out there in most Western countries who have been into China who have been compromised.
Paul Johnstone, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks very much, Tiffany. Nice to be here.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.